This one, God, did I already do the God, nature, necessity? Alright, so I guess I'm just gonna go to the next one, which would be mind and thought, I believe. Okay, 72. Page 72. Oops. Sorry. Okay, thought is one of the infinite attributes of God, which express God's eternal and infinite essence. Extended substance is one of the infinite attributes of God. Substance thinking and substance extended are one and the same substance. Comprehend how through one attribute, now through the other. The order and connection of ideas is the same as the order and connection of things. You're not gonna interrupt my video. I mean it. So don't act like a brat. Because if you're gonna distract from the point of this video, then just get off the camera. Okay? Are you gonna listen? Okay, alright. Alright. The order and the connection of ideas is the same as the order and connection of things. The human mind is part of the infinite intellect of God. When we say that the human mind perceives this or that, we make the assertion that God has this or that idea insofar as he is displayed through the nature of the human mind, or so far as he constitutes the essence of the human mind. The first element, which constitutes the actual being of the human mind, is the idea of some particular thing actually existing. There is nothing positive in ideas which causes them to be called false. Falsity consists in the privation of knowledge, which inadequate, fragmentary, or confused ideas involve. The different kinds of knowledge. We, in many cases, perceive and form our general notions. 1. From particular things represented to our intellect, fragmentarily. That didn't work. Confused and without order through our senses. I have settled to call such perceptions by the name of knowledge from the mere suggestions of experience. 2. From symbols, example, from the fact of having read or heard certain words, we remember things and form certain ideas concerning them, similar to those through which we imagine things. I shall call both of these ways of regarding things knowledge of the first kind, opinion or imagination. 3. From the fact that we have notions common to all men and adequate ideas of the properties of things. This I call reason and knowledge of the second kind. Besides these two kinds of knowledge, there is, as I will hereafter show, a third kind of knowledge, which we call imagination, or intuition. I will illustrate all three kinds of knowledge by a single example. 3 numbers are given for finding a fourth, which shall be to the third as the second is to the first. Tradesmen without hesitation multiply the second by the third, and divide the product by the first, either because they have not forgotten the rule which they received from a master without any proof, or because they have often made trial of it with simple numbers, or by virtue of proof of the 19th proposition of the sevenfold book of Elucid, namely in virtue of the general property of proportionals. But with very simple numbers, there is no need of this. For instance, 1, 2, 3 being given, everyone can see that the fourth proportional is 6, and this is much clearer because we infer the fourth number from an intuitive grasping of the ratio, which the first bears to the second. It is not in the nature of reason to regard things as contingent, but as necessary. It is in the nature of reason to perceive things under a certain form of eternity, sub quantum aeternitatis specie. Every idea of everybody, or every particular thing actually existing, necessarily involves the eternal and infinite essence of God, in proportion as any given body is more fitted than others for doing many actions or receiving many impressions at once. So also is the mind of which it is at the object more fitted than others for forming many simultaneous perceptions, and the more the actions of one body depend on itself alone, and the fewer other bodies concur with it in action, the more fitted is the mind of which it is the object for distinct comprehension. Alright, on the emotions. Most writers on the emotions and on human conduct seem to be treating rather of matters outside nature than of natural phenomena following nature's general laws. They appear to conceive man to be situated in nature as a kingdom within a kingdom, for they believe that he has oh for they for they believe that he disturbs rather than follows nature's order, and that he has absolute control over his actions. And that he is determined solely by himself. They attribute human infirmities and fickleness not to the power of nature in general, but to some mysterious flaw in the nature of man, which accordingly they bemoan, deride, despise, or, as usually happens, abuse. He who succeeds in hitting off the weaknesses of the human mind more eloquently or more acutely than his fellows is looked upon as a seer. Those are still there has been no lack of very excellent men, to whose toil and industry I confess myself much indebted, who have written many noteworthy things concerning the right way of life, and have given such sage advice to mankind. But no one, so far as I know, has defined the nature and strength of the emotions, and the power of the mind against them for their restraint. For the present, I wish to revert to those who would rather abuse or deride human emotions than understand them. Such persons will doubtless think it strange that I should attempt to treat of human vice and folly geometrically, and should wish to set forth with rigid reasoning those matters which they cry out against as repugnant to reason, frivolous, absurd, and dreadful. However, such is my plan. Nothing comes to pass in nature which can be set down to flaw therein, for nature is always the same and everywhere one, and the same in her efficacy and power of action. That is, nature's laws and ordinances, whereby all things come to pass and change from one form to the other, are everywhere and always the same, so that there should be one and the same method of understanding the nature of all things whatsoever, namely, through nature's universal laws and rules. Thus the passions of hatred, anger, and envy, and so on, considered in themselves, follow from this same necessity and efficacy of nature. They answer to certain definite causes, through which they are understood, and possess certain properties as worthy of being known as properties of anything else, whereof the contemplation in itself affords us delight. I shall therefore treat of the nature and strength of the emotions according to the same method as I employed therefore in the investigations concerning God and the mind. I shall consider human actions and desires in exactly the same manner as though I were concerned with lines, planes, and solids. On freedom of will. Will cannot be called a free cause, but only a necessary cause. In the mind there is no absolute or free will, but the mind is determined to wish this or that by a cause, which has also been determined by another cause, and this last by another cause, and so on to infinity. Men are mistaken in thinking themselves free. Their opinion is made up of consciousness of their own actions, and ignorance of the causes by which they are conditioned. Their idea of freedom, therefore, is simply their ignorance of any cause for their actions. As for their saying that human actions depend on the will, this is a mere phrase without any idea to correspond thereto. What the will is, and how it moves the body, they none of them know. But they will say that the mind alone can determine whether we speak or are silent, and a variety of similar states which, accordingly, we say depend on the mind's decree. I submit that the world would be much happier if men were as fully able to keep silence as they are to speak. Experience abundantly shows that men can govern anything more easily than their tongues, and restrain anything more easily than their appetites, whence it comes about that many believe that we are only free in respect to objects which we moderately desire, because our desire for such can easily be controlled by the thought of something else frequently remembered, but that we are by no means free in respect to what we seek with violent emotion, for our desire cannot then be allied with the remembrance of anything else, unless such persons had proved by experience that we do many things which we afterward repent of, and again, that we often, when assailed by contrary emotions, see the better to follow the worse. There would be nothing to prevent their believing that we are free in all things. Thus an infant believes that of his own free will it desires milk, an angry child believes that it freely desires vengeance, a timid child believes that it freely desires to run away. Further, a drunken man believes that he utters from the free decision of his mind words which, when he is sober, he would willingly have withheld. Thus, too, a delirious man, or a garrulous woman, a child, and others of like complexion believe that they speak from the free decision of their mind, when they are in reality unable to restrain their impulse to talk. Experience teaches us no less clearly than reason that men believe themselves to be free simply because they are conscious of their actions and unconscious of the causes whereby those actions are determined. And further it is plain that the dictates of the mind are but another name for the appetites, and therefore vary accordingly to the varying state of the body. Everyone shapes his actions according to his emotion. Those who are assailed by conflicting emotions know not that they wish. Those who are not attacked by any emotion are readily swayed this way or that. For the present, I wish to call attention to another point, namely that we cannot act by the decision of the mind unless we have the remembrance of to have done so. For instance, we cannot say a word without remembering that we have done so. Again, it is not within the free power of the mind to remember or forget anything at will. Therefore, the freedom of the mind must in any case be limited to the power of uttering or not uttering. Any case be limited to the power of uttering or not uttering something which it remembers. But when we dream that we speak, we believe that we speak from a free decision of the mind, yet we do not speak, or if we do, it is by a spontaneous motion of the body. Again, we dream that we are concealing something, and we seem to act from the same decision of the mind as that whereby we keep silence when awake concerning something we know. Lastly, we dream that from the free decision of our mind, we do something which we should not dare to do when awake. Now I should like to know whether there be in the mind two sorts of decisions, one sort of elusive and the other sort free. If our folly does not carry us so far as this, we must necessarily admit that the decision of the mind of which is believed to be free, it is not distinguishable from the imagination or memory, and is nothing more than the affirmation which an idea, by virtue of being an idea, necessarily involves. Therefore, these decisions of the mind arise in the mind by the same necessity as the ideas of things actually existing. Therefore, those who believe that they speak or keep silence or act in any way from the free decision of their mind do but dream with their eyes open. It may be objected, if a man does not act from free will, what will happen if the incentives to action are equally balanced, as in the case of Buridan's ass? Will he perish of hunger and thirst? If I say that he would, I shall seem to have in my thoughts an ass or the statue of a man rather than the actual man. If I say that he would not, he would then determine his own actions, and would consequently possess the faculty of going and doing whatever he liked. I am quite ready to admit that a man placed in the equilibrium described, namely, as perceiving nothing but hunger and thirst, a certain food and a certain drink, each equally distant from him, would die of hunger and thirst. If I am asked whether such an one should not rather be considered an ass than a man, I answer that I do not know, neither do I know, how a man should be considered who hangs himself, or how we should consider children, fools, madmen, etc. It remains to point out the advantage of knowledge of this doctrine as bearing on conduct, and this may be easily gathered from what has been said. The doctrine is good. Oh, shit. 1. Inasmuch as it teaches us to act solely according to the decree of God, and to be partakers of the divine nature, and so much the more as we perform more perfect actions and more to understand God. Such a doctrine not only completely tranquilizes our spirit, but also shows us where our highest happiness and blessedness is, namely solely in the knowledge of God, whereby we are led to act as love and piety shall bid us. We may thus clearly understand how far astray from a true estimate of virtue are those who expect to be decorated by God with high rewards for their virtue, and their best actions, as for having endured the direst slavery, as if virtue and the service of God were not in itself happiness and perfect freedom. I have to move. The mosquitoes are eating me up. I'm going to continue on page 80, part 2.